Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Manufacturing Talk Radio. I'm Tim Grady, and I'm here with Lou Weiss, who is the founder and host of the show. He's also the president of All Metals and Forge Group, an industrial supplier of open die forgings and seamless roll rings that they manufacture for the heavy industry and machinery building. If you're looking for those, go to steelforge.com. And joining us today is Ben, let me get your last name right, Ben Talbert.
Correct.
Ben, you are with a company that does search, and we're going to explore that because I think it's more than executive search. And one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, because every company that thinks about using a search firm thinks, how much is this going to cost? Having been through this, I know that it's actually an enormous savings. But Ben, welcome to the show, and why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, thank you, Tim and Lou, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I've enjoyed listening to your content and reading your magazine. So it's fun to actually be here. But yes, so Better Than Found is really something that started 20 years ago when I began studying as an engineer, and then went to work in manufacturing and engineering, design engineering, and industrial construction for a 10-year career before starting into recruiting for the industries that I know. So I've been doing that now for 8 years, and really set out to do something a little different, have a different approach to recruiting, and treat it more like consulting, and really getting to know the clients that I work with and understanding their gaps, their needs, why they're making the hire. I mean, I still think like an engineer, touring their processes, seeing their processes, meeting their team, just helps me tremendously when I'm trying to find people, and then just knowing when I'm sitting across from the right people.
Must be an interesting year this last year or two.
It has been exciting. 2020 actually was my best year up to that point, just because I am diversified across multiple sectors of manufacturing. So when one is not doing so well, the other one seems to be doing very well. And I recruit in the industrial space throughout the Southeast. But in 2021, when we rebranded to Better Than Found, our phones were ringing, and volume was about double anything we'd seen before in 2021 than any previous year.
And not surprised. My experience with search firms in working with clients has been, the initial impression is, oh, this is going to cost me X dollars, and why don't I just do it myself? And do it myself means somebody's got to write an ad, they got to place the ad, they got to hopefully get resumes in, they got to filter through the resumes, they got to set up appointments. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to get a candidate in, and then to get hired, and then 6 months down the road you fire them because they were bad hires.
Or you get sued.
Right. Yeah, the cost of making a bad hire, I've heard numbers of anywhere from 200 to 400% is the cost of making a bad hire, and that just depends on how long it takes you to figure out that they were a bad hire.
Yeah, right.
But people seem to forget that you're still paying a salary to someone that has to do that work, and this is what we do for a living, day in and day out. So we have developed a process for evaluating talent and sourcing talent that has proven positive time and time again. And that's the process that you're adding to your team. And that's when I become, that's my best company relationships are that way. When I'm a trusted advisor and I become part of their team. just part of the hiring process.
So this past year, we still hear people are looking for people. You can't hire people. You can't find people. People are the Great Resignation. People are leaving. People have decided that they're going to open up a new business
Right.
where 90% of them fail, and then they come to you to get a job. It has to have been a wild and crazy period, even though you state that you had your best years. It's best years in an unusual environment.
Right. Yeah. We referred to it as the Wild West of recruiting last year. And this year is proving to be much of the same. But last year was odd in that I felt like we had high demand and high supply, which I know breaks some laws or something. But we really weren't having trouble getting people on the phone and interested in hearing about something new. I had a lot of executives, reach out and just say, hey, I'm pretty happy, but I keep hearing about what's going on. So I just wanted to keep my ear to the ground and reach out and stay in touch. So a lot of people interested in making a move. And yeah, the Great Resignation kind of, our response to the pandemic, cost more people their jobs than the Great Recession. And that really caused an upheaval in the job market. And right now, the employees or the candidates are in the driver's seat for the first time in really a long time. So no longer are, companies doing you a favor by hiring you, but the employee is doing you a favor by coming to work every day and working for you. So it's really flipped things. And it's one of the critical things that I think companies overlook is not keeping a good pulse on the hiring market. And it's a dynamic thing. It changes about every 6 months. So if you don't like the hiring market we're in, just sit tight. It'll be different, and technology in our industry changes very rapidly as well. So it's one of those things you have to keep a pulse on. In an employee driven market like this, you got to really start looking at your hiring practices and candidate experience and how are we attracting people, how are we attracting the candidates that we want. And so it's something that a lot of companies are slow to change to.
So what's your magic sauce?
Well, my magic sauce is I try to help people. Whether it's a company that I'm working with or a candidate, and I really don't sell anything on either side. So you approach people with with that mindset, with putting their best interest in mind, and I don't know, and that seems to get me to the right candidate faster. So when we don't post jobs and we don't pitch jobs to people that we don't know. We do targeted headhunting and we build relationships with people. We get to know what their career goals are. And, by the end of our first conversation, we understand what they're looking for, and we know when to give them a call to let them know that we've found it or connected the dots for them. That's really, for me, the fact that I've worked in the industry for now coming up on 18 years, connecting the dots in recruiting between a company and a candidate, that's what helps me do that. And I've seen a lot of recruiters come and go in this industry in 8 years of doing it. And that is the hardest thing to find, is recruiters that get it, that speak the manufacturing language, that know what lean manufacturing is. And, I was brought up at Milliken and Company with, safety and operational excellence and total, TPM, and just trained in all of these things. So that is probably the most valuable thing that I bring to the table, is just being able to have that when I'm sitting across from a candidate and evaluating them, and when I'm sitting down with a company and understanding, where are the gaps in their organization, and what solution or what problems are we trying to solve with making this hire. A lot more to fit and what's going to make a candidate successful in a company than what people put on a job description. So that's that's been helpful for us.
Sometimes employees just disappear. Oh, there he is. He's back.
All right, dropped out.
Sometimes employees disappear.
Just disappear.
Yeah.
So when you're out looking for a company who's looking to hire, I'm a manufacturing company. I need 3 engineers. I need a couple of lathe operators, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And you know this company because you've already talked to him, pitched him, or not pitched him. And what I'm missing is, where do you find the people, the candidates?
Right. Okay. You want to really know the secret sauce.
I do.
Okay. Well, so that's a combination of tools. So we have the sourcing tools. We would call that sourcing candidates. That's kind of that end of our business. The sourcing tools that we have available to us today are phenomenal, and they search through the 500 to 600 million records on the internet to find people just through a computer, through doing a search that way. There's technology that automates that search and will produce a list of candidates for you. But I find that, I can get to a candidate faster, obviously, by reaching out to someone in my network that knows, that's in that area of expertise. And I can usually get pointed to the right candidate faster than most. Now, that's harder to do when I'm, recruiting for a West Coast sales rep for one of my clients that's based here in the Southeast. And that's where the traditional, the software that we're using, the sourcing tools that we have are there. But when you have that list, it's what do you do with that list? Recruiting is a very transactional industry, and a lot of smiling and dialing going on and pitching people jobs. And I never appreciated that approach when I was on the other side of the desk. So I think a lot of recruiting firms ignore candidate experience to their own detriment. But I don't know if I know that's about as specific as I could probably get, but so we network with professionals and hiring managers, decision makers for a living. So we live in the markets that we recruit for, and that helps us get to the people we're looking for much faster. And then we have those sourcing tools and software that help us find the right people as well.
Do you know what your retention rate is?
I can't quote you that off the top of my head. It's a very good question. I think, I would say it's very good. I was trying to remember what it was giving me a pause. I was trying to remember the last candidate that did not work out with a company. So it's been a while. Since that has happened.
Ben, I'm just curious, are you industry specific or targeted on a series of industries, or are you broad-based? Just wondering.
So I would, in the recruiting world, I'd probably be considered somewhat of a generalist, but I recruit in the industrial sectors, and it's professional and executive level recruiting. So we're not doing staffing or hourly positions, although we have a lot of conversations with our manufacturing clients because they have a they have a lot of struggles in that area. But we are doing direct hire, some contract recruiting for really salaried professionals, from operations to anything that would touch a manufacturing operation, HR, finance, sales, product development, R&D, into the C-suite positions as well. And then recruit a lot for companies that are connected to manufacturing. So they manufacturers reps that sell equipment into manufacturing, or automation equipment companies. Really anything in that space, we like to play ball in, and our process allows us to have that flexibility, because it's a little bit the guy who taught me was a little bit OCD, and we've been accused of being thorough, but we take a little more time on the front end to define the target and make sure that all the stakeholders have weighed in, and we have outlined that, and all sign off that yes, you understand now what we're looking for, before we get going. And then we're not the type of recruiting firm that is gonna do a search in our database and throw 12 resumes over and say, what do you think? I mean, when we send in a candidate, we have a very high success rate of that candidate being interviewed. If one of our candidates that we submit is not being interviewed, we need to schedule a call and figure out, hey, what's changed, or did we miss something? Because this is what we agreed we wanted. So we're more the snipers in the industry than I think in an industry that does a lot of machine gunning.
Why don't you give us your URL, website, and/or email, so that our listeners might be able to reach out to you?
Sure. So the website is www.btfsearch.com. That's Bravo Tango Foxtrot search.com.
Military guy.
Hey, we try to help the transitioning military guys as much as we can. That's not an easy transition to make, for sure.
No doubt. So I read that you have a affinity for the textile world.
Yeah, textiles, it's really been in my family for as far back as my mother can trace. And I have a lot of paraphernalia in the office sitting around from manufacturing plants, some from plants that some of my clients, the guys running the companies that I recruit for, that they've worked in. So it is a tight-knit sandbox of people. And I studied textile engineering at NC State, minored in industrial engineering. And so it's one of those industries that once it's in your blood, it's kind of hard to get out. So do a decent amount of recruiting in the textile industry, but also stay diversified and enjoy doing that.
And in modern manufacturing, how much of a shift has occurred that needs candidates who are more skilled, more knowledgeable, maybe even that 4-year degree, than it used to be the blue collar world of 50 or 70 years ago?
So if I understand your question, you're asking how much manufacturing has moved to really needing advanced skilled labor to operate the processes and equipment. That's a really good question.
I'm not looking for stats. I'm just looking for your experience talking to candidates.
Right. I mean, I would say I'd say there's still a good mix of manufacturing needs out there for people that are, obviously highly skilled and mechatronics, and, can operate certain very specific equipment, and then there's still a good deal of unskilled positions as well. Unskilled is probably not the right terminology, but I mean, there are companies that will that will hire anybody that's willing to come to work right now.
And that's all over the country, not just manufacturing. I understand that.
Well, there's a couple of million tradesmen coming out of Eastern Europe now who's probably looking for jobs. You know, the immigration issue would solve some of the problems that perhaps exist today in this country.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, when we talk to manufacturers and kind of solicit them, labor shortages are a huge thing, and then they're asking questions like, how do we motivate the workforce again? How do we get a motivated workforce? And I think that's an interesting question to ask, and it's a problem that people are having. They're having a lot of turnover of young professionals, and then of course supply chain issues now. But to me, solving the labor issues, really, there's only three ways to do that. I mean, you can automate and reduce your need for labor, which I think you should be looking at that. Although, you know, people that automate equipment, they're also strapped for people. So it's be interested to see lead times on delivery for that automated equipment, or finding alternate sources for a motivated workforce. If you think this workforce that you have is not motivated, you got to get creative. And immigration laws is one of those things that we ought to tackle. I mean, there's people trying to get in this country every day that want to work. So we're not doing a good job of taking advantage of that and having good processes and systems in place to get them in our manufacturing plants. I would love to see motivated Ukrainians, you know, in our manufacturing plants. They need help, and we need jobs. We just have to connect those. You know, another niche of people that you could find that are motivated to work are some of those niche groups that have been disenfranchised by, you know, society, the people maybe coming out of a prison sentence or something like that have a real hard time getting a job. There are programs like Jumpstart that we have here in South Carolina that are programs designed to do that, to help these people get back to work, get on their feet. And so that's a people group that really wants to get back to work. So
you know, Tim and I had a couple of shows a couple of years ago about the prison situation and the ex-prisoners coming out into the workplace. And I talked about immigration and so on and so forth. And we try not to do this, but it's almost impossible. It's hard to talk about these kinds of things without talking about politics, because the politicians, Washington, they're not doing their jobs. They're doing things like, if I'm an ex-con, okay, that goes on my driver's license. So now I can't get a job.
right.
Who wants to hire an ex-con who did shoplifting? The business with the immigration laws, terrible, terrible. I mean, this country became great for what it is because of immigration 120 years ago. And now we're doing everything that we can to keep them out or warehouse them down on the southern border. So, like I said, I don't want to talk politics because I only get in trouble. But
Right.
you kind of get the gist of where I'm going with that.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's definitely not a problem we'll solve here, but it's something that I mean, our lawmakers need to hear our voices on, for sure. I mean, the other thing, I mean, so that you got automate, find alternate sources, and this to me is a big one. But our manufacturing companies need to begin to transform, really, their organizations. I mean, our culture has changed faster than employers can keep up, and the way that they have been taught, the world that they've grown up in is not the world we have in manufacturing. And we are ripe for some very major organizational change. And in this market, this hiring market where employees have that, it's even more motivation to begin focusing on those things. And our manufacturing companies, when I was brought up, it was the customer, everything was the customer. And obviously that's important. You can't do away with that, but you've got to focus on caring for your people, and you've got to become a company where people want to be. And, if you're going to attract the best talent, you have to figure out how to be an attractive company. And it sounds, that's as simple as I can put it, but it's a lot more complex than that. But to do that, I mean, you have to think of your employees as a relationship, and you have to have regular conversations with them, and understand what their needs are, and what their worries are, and what their dreams are, and how you can become more of an advocate to helping your employees succeed. And I think the companies that can begin to do that, and I've been doing some research, and there are companies out there that have really started to transform really their HR departments. They've taken the mission statement from their customer service team and made that the mission statement for their HR department, and began treating their employees like they would treat their customers, and helping them solve whatever their individual problems are, because we have 5 generations of worker in the workforce today in manufacturing. Everyone has different needs, and we have an opportunity, but manufacturing by nature is slow to change.
So how has the COVID remote working scenario have changed all the things that we've just talked about?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to, I mean, we use Zoom, and Zoom, is a great tool when it works appropriately.
Right.
No slur intended, Mr. Zoom, but there
Right.
are those days. And how is, you say to be able to communicate with your employees, when COVID started, within days, we were all operating out of our homes. We had scanners and printers and all that stuff delivered to people at home so they were able to work. And then once a month we would have, our building it's a 4-story building, and they're on stilts. And underneath the building is a garage parking lot. And once a month we would have everybody come to work at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we would have coffee and donuts in the parking lot, sitting in beach chairs and so on and so forth, just to be able to talk.
Right.
Not necessarily talk about business, but talk about how you doing? How's the family?
Right.
Oh, your son is not well, and that was appreciated until the temperature got to about 25 degrees. And we're in New Jersey. And so we wound up stopping that, which we're probably about to start next month. But you're right, you have to take into account employees and their families. And our company, All Metals and Forge Group, we've got people that have been here. Tim, how long are you here? 27 years?
27.
Yeah, I've got a couple of 25s, a couple of 26, a couple of 15s. So that's a good sign that basically we're doing okay in that department.
Mhm.
But a lot of companies don't.
Right. Yeah, building that community, I think, is important. And some of these things that companies are doing and services they're offering, especially for young people. I mean, people are like, man, that really is expensive. Well, it's actually cheaper than what you're doing now, which is, having to hire and have people leave and turnover and those things.
Yeah.
But the working from home thing, we still haven't figured out how to manufacture from people's living rooms yet. So a lot of those folks, and my clients, I mean, they never stopped. Some of them maybe stopped for a week or two or whatever, but the people on the floor had to be there to make the products. So they figured out how to make it through that, and be successful. And but yeah, a lot of the office positions that, okay, yeah, we could technically, if you're a project manager or whatever, you could technically do this from your house. And a lot of corporate offices evolved to handle that. And some of them found new ways to work, and hey, this works great, and we're going to stay this way. And others fought it tooth and nail and made it miserable for everybody, and came back as soon as they possibly could. But that whole event caused employees to rethink their priorities and what they were doing, and it's just caused a lot of movement.
One thing that I discovered that, and now it's 2 years that we've been operating remotely, or most of us are remote. I come to work every day, but that's because no one else is here. The point is that the thing that I found is that the efficiency level, which most employers are afraid of, people working from home, they're going to take naps, they're going to go for bike rides, they're going to go to the pool and the gym and so on. I have found that everyone in our company has been operating more efficiently, putting in more hours, and being more collaborative within our Zoom meetings and so on. So I was one of those that was concerned, and it's worked out fine, to the point that I'm not sure they're ever coming back.
Right. And I think a lot of companies have experienced that. I think the challenge there becomes, if you're going to onboard somebody to that team, how do they get acclimated to the culture of the company?
Yeah, that's the problem.
I mean, there's companies obviously that have done it. I mean, I mean, a lot of IT companies, have done it, and they're not coming back. And but then there's just a lot of jobs where you got to be there to collaborate, because everything is fast paced, and you need to be in the same room brainstorming and real time information. So it is interesting. And then you see cases where people don't understand why we're having to go back, and they're having to go back. And then, so it will be interesting. There are a lot more people looking for that type of work now that they've had a taste of it.
Mhm.
And so there are people leaving companies that are mandating we come back to find that remote work because of the freedom that it produces. And I mean, I think putting that, I would say there's always bad apples, that may, spoil the bunch, so to speak. But for the most part, when you put it on employees to, like this, like you're trusting them to go out, manage their time, that, like you said, you've seen efficiency improvement, and they're actually working longer because they can work when they want to.
Right.
And there's large manufacturing companies that went to unlimited vacation days and have actually seen a drop in the use of vacation. So
Where were we going?
yeah,
Right. Well, Ben, I wish we had more time for this subject.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you presenting Better Than Found to our audience. And to remind everybody, it's btfsearch.com. If you want to get in touch with Ben and you've got a candidate need, I think it's a smart move. Ben, thanks for joining us on Manufacturing Talk Radio.
Thank you so much, Tim and Lou. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. You as well.
For those of you who are searching around the web for btfsearch.com, also come to jacketmediaco.com and check out any of our podcasts, including this one. And thank you for joining us on Manufacturing Talk Radio.